the following information and material: Panentheism, Addressing Monism and Dualism by Daniel J. Shepard, has its basis. It is a tract that I'll be reading from, and it has its basis within the larger work of a 3-volume text entitled The War and Peace of a New Metaphysical Perception by SUNY Press. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested in obtaining the larger body of work, which this is based within. It is The War and Peace of a New Metaphysical Perception. And it's new because I would say that it attempts to do almost the impossible by solving a number of irresolvable paradoxes regarding reality, as presented by a number of philosophers, both past and present. It's a 3-volume text. Volume 1 addresses perceived irresolvable paradoxes regarding reality as presented by Zeno, Aristotle, Boethius, Copernicus, Leibniz, and Kant from the vantage point of a new metaphysical perception, namely that of symbiotic panentheism, which is a variation on panentheisms, on the panentheistic models available. Although all the great thinkers are not recognized as philosophers, there is little denying that each profoundly impacted our perception of reality. For example, Einstein, among others. And Volume 2 of the work continues the progression into the recent past regarding perceived irresolvable paradoxes as presented by Hegel, Einstein, Russell, Heidegger, and philosophy itself. Concepts such as active observation, time, distance, interrelationships, exclusionism, and nothingness are considered in their relevance, explored as a foundation for new metaphysical perceptions. In Volume 3, description is a futuristic examination of metaphysical systems, responsibility, understanding, conceit, continuums, and history's vector. Volume 3 moves the work into a futuristic examination of metaphysical systems. In addition, this volume examines 3 new categories of metaphysics which emerge from this metaphysical model. These 3 categories are metaphysical engineering, practical metaphysics, and theoretical metaphysics. So, The War and Peace of a New Metaphysical Perception by Daniel J. Shepard is the larger body of work that this particular tract is extracted from. And I'll be presenting the ideas within that. It's basically concentrating on monism versus dualism in theological and philosophical thought. So I'll be covering that shortly. In the meantime, thus far, statistics convey that the 7.951 billion inhabitants on Earth, a very minute percentage, fall within the category of quote-unquote unbeliever, which include atheists, and agnostics. According to meta-AI analysis, 7%, or around 500 million, are non-believers. I might tend to think that it's a little higher than that, but that this is nonetheless what it said. It can be difficult, however, to quantify an exact number for or of atheists in the world. This is an estimate. This said, what can we say concerning the 93%, which are believers of some stripe or another? Those who do believe in an ultimate absolute, which religion calls God, have they lost their minds? Or let's just assume an absolute infinite God does exist, and it's not as unreasonable to be a believer as the unbelieving atheist assumes. Let's do the math. In a democracy, the majority prevails as far as politics or voting is concerned. So let's assume that 93% are indeed right for believing in God, and that God does in fact exist, at least for the majority. So let's assume God exists. This is primary. Specific religious traditions are secondary expressions, so set that aside for now. If then God exists, how big is God? Atheism reduces God to absolute zero by saying it's non-existent, and those who believe must be somehow mistaken. A whopping 93% of the Earth's population. God is so small, asserts atheism, that he is non-existent, a big fat zero. Going on the assumption God exists, as does the majority, we can safely say that God is bigger than zero. And if we can imagine God as having size, and because God matters to most, size really does matter. Next, we have pantheism that says God is everything we see in the universe and nature, but God is no more than that. So God's conceptual size increases from nothing to everything we see in the universe and nature. Classical theism also increases God's size even more by emphasis upon the transcendence of spirit, yet rejects that God has any presence within the universe and nature, or anything resembling pantheism. Can God be any bigger than this? Yes, roughly, we can conceptually combine pantheism with the best that theism has to offer, and we increase God's size maximally by doing so. So we get symbiotic panentheism. How big is God? Well, as we assume that 93% of the global population are not as bonkers as atheists might think, and God is not dead. If God is absolute and infinite, then it's best to ascribe to what religions call God the largest size conceivable, and this is only found within a panentheistic metaphysical theology. In order for God to be maximal in size, stature, and location, as fully omnipresent, then only panentheism meets these requirements. Atheism, pantheism, and classical theism, then, are but partial, particular views of the God-world-universe relationship and contradicts the attributes of full omnipresence. Panentheism solves this paradox. So, in a universe where God, according to some, is considered either all or nothing, and then you have the in-betweens of classical theism, which posits God as here but not there. God's presence is in this location but not this location. God is in me but not in them. There you have a dualistic worldview, which is also a paradox. When we have full omnipresence in mind, God is everywhere, everything, and all at once. God is either all or nothing. So we have a choice. All, the in-between of a particular, or nothing, atheism. So we have by degree, if God were considered, if God had size and location, the best perception of the God-world relationship, if we were to compare all of these isms, deism, atheism, pantheism, and classical theism. Only panentheism solves the contradictions which arise within all of these other isms or worldviews concerning the God-world relationship. And so we're going to address monism and dualism in the context of panentheism. And this is what we come up with. So from the start, panentheism addressing monism, dualism, a gift from one soul to another. The gift, copyright 2011. Second edition, July 4th, 2014. Panentheism, monism, dualism, thesis, antithesis, title. Either or, the monist is wrong and the monist is right. The dualist is right and the dualist is wrong. The gift, copyright. Any part of these works may be reproduced or utilized in any form or by any means. The formal copyright was only obtained to protect the source and the integrity of the work and to guarantee your access and authorization to freely use and reproduce this work. These concepts are not my own. They are the emerging and logical conclusion to the blending of ideas created within a society supported and maintained by vast numbers of people, including you and those who came before you. That was a copyright disclaimer from the author of the material. Panentheism is the only understanding of reality rationally capable of fully addressing the debate regarding the basic essence of the individual, debating the philosophical paradox of monism versus dualism within philosophy of religions, and the world's spiritual traditions for that matter. In the 19th and 20th centuries, science became too technical and mathematical for the philosopher, or anyone else except a few specialists. Philosophers reduced the scope of their inquiries so much that Wittgenstein, the most famous philosopher of this century, said, "The sole remaining task for philosophers is the analysis of language." What a come down from the great tradition of philosophy from Aristotle to Kant. Stephen Hawking, A Brief History of Time. So it is the 20th century represents the dark age of philosophy, for philosophy condemned itself to the same status philosophy gave to God, as philosophy embraced Nietzsche's perception, God is dead, and as surely as philosophy embraced the death of God, so too philosophy embraced the death of metaphysics. The error, the paradox of either or. The perception, understanding monism and dualism, moves our perceptual understanding of the system into that of being a system filled with both. As such, monism and dualism now have a location within which each can be found to exist. However, the understanding regarding the role of monism and the role of dualism, as well as the understanding regarding the interrelationship between the monism and dualism, not only remain in a state of confusion, but even more disconcerting, the existence of such an interrelationship is not recognized as significant aspect of the larger system. It is this state of confusion which will be specifically redressed or addressed within this tractate. The error of contemporary philosophy, either or. Introduction. Philosophy, both Eastern and Western, can be reduced to one of two forms of metaphysical systems. Either the Aristotelian metaphysical system, Cartesianism, a closed, passive, wherein the whole of the closed system is passive, or the Kant-Hegel metaphysical system, non-Cartesianism, an open, active system wherein the whole of the open system is active. The names do not indicate Eastern philosophy has emerged from the thoughts of the West. Rather, the names applied to the metaphysical systems are simply names best personified by the thinkers Aristotle, Kant, and Hegel. Why use the works of Aristotle as the personification of the closed passive system and the works of Kant and Hegel as the personification of the open active system? Since this work, The War and Peace of a New Metaphysical Perception, examines the time frame beginning with 500 BC and ending with 2003 AD, it is from the thinkers existing within this time frame from which such a choice was to be made. General consensus would appear to agree that these three thinkers were the most original, rational, and complete thinkers of this time period to discuss the issues of metaphysical systems. But the Aristotelian and the Kant-Hegelian systems have been unsuccessful in resolving simple paradoxes that have existed for eons. In addition, both systems appear to be incapable of resolving newer paradoxes such as Russell's paradox, as well as newer paradoxes emerging from the more recent scientific concepts such as Einstein's theory of relativity. Stating the obvious is not the point of this work. The point of this work is constructive criticism, not obstructionism. This work suggests replacing the two present metaphysical systems with a blend of the two. Blending the two metaphysical systems is not a process of using thesis and antithesis to obtain a totally new metaphysical system, but rather the process becomes using thesis and antithesis to obtain a blended synthesis. The result of blending the two systems is the creation of a symbiotic relationship between Cartesianism and non-Cartesianism. The result is the construction of the first new metaphysical model to evolve in the new millennium, the third millennium, the new metaphysical system, A, an open passive system powered by a closed active system wherein the whole of the closed system is itself passive and the whole of the open system is active. B, an open active system containing a totally independent closed passive system wherein elements of the open active system found within the closed passive system are generated independent of the open active system. As complicated as such statements may appear, the system itself is actually quite simple. The Aristotelian metaphysical system evolved in the first millennium. The Kant-Hegel metaphysical system evolved in the second millennium. Eventually, a new all-encompassing metaphysical system will evolve in the third millennium. The development of the metaphysical system of the first millennium accompanied us as our species explored the concept of geographical rights. The development of the metaphysical system of the second millennium accompanied us as our species explored the concept of global rights. A new metaphysical perception needs to emerge, which will dominate our expansion into the vast depths of the universe. Such a system will by necessity need to match our advances in both technology and extraterrestrial cultural intrusions and intrusiveness, providing that there are indeed extraterrestrial species in the universe, and we are, as our species is not all there is. If such a metaphysical system does not emerge, history will repeat itself. The time periods involving the exploration of the globe and the initial explorations of the Americas, Africa, and the East by the West lead to horrific human and environmental trauma supported by perceptions of geographic rights. This trauma was not unique to Western action. The inhumanity imposed upon individuals was generated by both East and West. Human geographical rights are in the process of conceding their status to global rights. Such rights will have no less a negative impact upon the frontiers of the universe than geographical rights had upon the frontiers of our planet. How do we avoid repeating our species' past negative acts? Can we do so by establishing a universal philosophy based upon a foundation of a new metaphysical thought? The result is the development of a foundation for action derived from rational thought rather than depending upon a foundation for action derived from examination of past actions steeped in horrific negativity. How is one to accomplish such a monumental leap in human behavior? One must identify the foundation of action which created the past history of human negativity and modify the foundation. And what is the foundation of human behavior which initiates human action? The foundation for human behavior is metaphysical thought, metaphysical perception. We are what we think we are. We are a species which acts based upon what it rationally perceives itself to be, believes itself to be, sees itself to be. In short, we are what philosophy, religion, and science defines us to be. If such is the case, then what is that science, religion, and philosophy have been debating for the last 2,500 years? Religion, science, and philosophy have been debating the legitimacy of the Cartesianism versus the non-Cartesianism. Simplified, the statement becomes, which is correct, monism or dualism? The philosophical debate, either awareness of awareness, intentionality, knowing is an intimate characteristic of the physical, or it is not. The religious debate, either there is a soul or there is not. The scientific debate, either awareness, consciousness is an innate characteristic of the physical or it is not. Innate characteristics. The question dominating the debate has been, is awareness an innate characteristic of the physical? The question, however, has become distorted over time. Applying reductionism to the debate, the actual question is the physical an intimate characteristic of the abstract? Or is the abstract the intimate characteristic of the physical? In essence, the question becomes, is the abstract in the physical, or is the physical in the abstract? Spiritually speaking, you could call the abstract spirit and the physical matter. And if one or the other is the case, then why is it true? Modern-day philosophers lean toward discussing the abstract in terms of the question, is the abstract an intimate characteristic of the physical? Modern-day philosophers are in essence attempting to understand the relationship between the two, the physical and the abstract, matter and spirit, added for emphasis. Contemporary philosophers remain perplexed by Zeno and his identification of multiplicity and seamlessness. Philosophers, scientists, and theists do not understand how seamlessness can coexist with multiplicity, or simplicity with complexity, or vice versa, and as such are baffled by the concept regarding classification. Are we any further than we were since Zeno initiated the debate regarding the duality of the physical and the abstract, multiplicity and seamlessness? The previous 10 tracks, and I would say this is an embodiment of the rest of the material found in the War and Peace of a New Metaphysical Perception. These examined fundamental paradoxes, which existed as paradoxes in the past and continue to exist as paradoxes today. Contemporary philosophy remains steeped in the discussions of the past. Monism is consciousness an innate characteristic of the physical, or dualism, are consciousness and physicality separate entities? The discussions of contemporary philosophers have advanced the great debate no further than Zeno's suggestion that the physical and the abstract are two separate entities. Zeno's classical paradoxes initiated the modern debate regarding the very existence of monism and dualism as modes of perception. It was Kant's work which inadvertently suggested that Aristotle's perception regarding passive consciousness existing within the universe should in actuality be a passive universe existing within the confines of active consciousness. It was Hegel's work which took Kant's work to a higher level and inadvertently suggested Kant's passive universe existing within the confines of active consciousness should actually be an active universe existing within the confines of active consciousness. So mind, matter, matter, mind. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? In essence, it is the examination of all three, Aristotle, Kant, and Hegel, which contemporary philosophy must examine in the attempt to bring order to the great debate modern technology brings to the discussion of ethics, bioethics, religious ethics, social ethics, judicial ethics, corporate ethics, environmental ethics, personal, parental, maternal ethics, etc. Matrimonial ethics as well. Contemporary philosophy senses ethics to exist in the form of equally important ethical debates encompassing their own form of subject matter, biological, religious, social, judicial, corporate, environmental, personal, parental, matrimonial, etc. Such a perception of ethics is, in fact, simply a reformulation of the monist dualist debate. To view ethics as being divisible is to view the consciousness as innate characteristic of the physical. To view ethics as being indivisible, all ethical problems being simply a restatement of the separation of consciousness and the physical, is to view consciousness and the physical as separate entities. But how can this be? Wouldn't the reverse of each statement be the case? Wouldn't viewing ethics as being divisible into an endless array of independent situations evolve from the perception that consciousness and the physical are separate one from the other? If the physical is endlessly divisible, and if the action of intentionality is simply an innate characteristic of complex physicality, then ethics can rationally be applied as a situational application, appropriately applied to the particular sequencing of actions generated by specific complex arrangements of atoms, molecules, compounds, cells, tissues, organs, systems, life forms, and social settings. Regarding ethics, the scenario of ethics being situational is simplicity, which in turn begets complexity. Simplicity of the monist lies in the complexity of both the intra-actions and inter-actions emerging from the situational applications listed previously. It is the dualist approach which leads to the simplification of ethics through the perception that individual consciousness once formed as independent of the physical. It is the dualists who lay the groundwork regarding multiplicity of individuality having equal rights, from which emerges the uniformity of ethics. Thus, the uniformity of ethics emerges from a universal fundamental foundation of ethics, a universal philosophy acting as the very foundation from which all ethics emerges. It is just such a perception, the understanding regarding the significance of the individual to not only the whole, but to itself, which initiates the simplicity of ethics. On the other hand, the monists view consciousness as an innate characteristic of the physical, and the physical, thanks to Einstein, being what it is, being capable of relativistic scientific prioritization, consequently becomes subject to apparent, infinite, eternal subsectioning. As such, the physical becomes capable of being prioritized relativistically, not only in the scientific sense, but in the ontological and metaphysical sense. Such prioritization leads to the evolution of multiple forms of ethics, which take on a life of their own. Such new life forms then begin to initiate their own natural process of evolutionary principles, of which survival of the fittest becomes the leading motivator, much to the detriment of the individual self. In the short term, centuries, we are referring to the individual form of ethics, bioethics, environmental, corporate, etc. In the more protected or protracted term, millennia, we are in actuality referring to the individual itself. Over the span of a millennia, we are referring to three forms of individuality. One, God, the whole. Singularity exists. Two, the individual, the part. Individuality exists. Three, being, action, process, reality. The universe, action, exists. What viewpoint do ontology, cosmology, and metaphysics take when referring to a model of reality upon which this particular form of ethical perceptions emerge? There are presently three forms of perceptions in place. The three perceptual models vary for each of the three means by which we examine the whole of reality. In spite of the three forms of perception of the whole, however, one argument remains in common for all three perceptions. The commonality of each perception, which remains in place. Each model is divided into two groups, the monist and the dualist. The commonality which emerges from the schematics within the monist models, unique individuality acting as the unique sub-element referred to as the individual, is not a form of permanent reality in terms of its own unique form of individuality. Within the dualist models, unique individuality acting as the unique sub-element referred to as the individual is a form of permanent reality in terms of its own unique form of individuality. Within the new metaphysical perception of the individual acting within the abstract, spirit, or what religions call God, that is, a panentheistic metaphysical perception of the individual acting within God, both the monist and the dualist models are fundamental to the whole system. Within the new metaphysical perceptual model, Unique individuality acting as the unique sub-element, referred to as the individual, is not a form of permanent reality in terms of its own unique form of individuality, and unique individuality acting as the unique sub-element referred to as the individual is a form of permanent reality in terms of its own unique form of individuality. But how is it possible for both to be the case when each statement contradicts the other? Contradiction occurs only because the two statements are examined through the understanding of two, and only two existing metaphysical models or systems. This versus that, either or. Elimination of the contradictory clash of the two statements occurs only if one re-examines the two statements in light of a third metaphysical model. And that is the end of the discussion for this post. I'll probably segment this into 3 parts. Part 2, resolving the issue regarding the conflict between homogeneity, and diversity, or monism, dualism, oneness, multiplicity, etc. Thank you for listening. To be continued.